The Book and the Truth. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the Whitmore estate, painting everything in shades of honey and gold. Marcus Whitmore lay perfectly still on the leather sofa in his study, his breathing slow and measured. To anyone watching, he appeared to be sound asleep, exhausted from another long week of running his technology empire, but Marcus wasn't sleeping at all. His eyes were closed. Yes, but behind his lids he was completely alert. This was a test he'd devised after weeks of growing suspicion. Small things had been going missing from his study. Nothing valuable, just odd items. A fountain pen here, a leather bookmark there. Papers rearranged on his desk when he was certain he'd left them differently. His head of security had suggested installing cameras, but Marcus had dismissed the idea. He knew exactly who had access to this room during the day. There was only one person it could be: Emma. Emma Torres had been working at the Whitmore estate for 3 months now. She was 23, quiet as a ghost, and seemed to jump at her own shadow. The agency had sent her over after his previous housekeeper retired, describing her as diligent but painfully shy. That was an understatement. Emma barely made eye contact. She spoke in whispers. During their few interactions, she'd seemed terrified of him, which Marcus found both puzzling and slightly insulting. He wasn't a monster. Sure, he was demanding in business, but he'd always been respectful to his household staff. Still, something about Emma didn't add up. The missing items, the way she hurried out of rooms when he entered, the odd sense that she was always watching him when she thought he wasn't looking. So, today, Marcus had staged this little scene. He'd made a show of working late into the morning, complaining loudly to his assistant about exhaustion, then settled onto the sofa in his study. He'd left the door slightly ajar, an invitation. Now he waited. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Marcus was beginning to think his plan had failed when he heard it, the soft whisper of footsteps in the hallway. They paused outside his study door. He kept his breathing even, deep, the picture of a man dead to the world. The door opened with barely a sound. Through his lashes, Marcus could make out Emma's small figure as she stepped inside. She was wearing her usual uniform, a black dress with a white apron, her dark hair pulled back neatly. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching him. Marcus's pulse quickened despite himself. What was she planning? Then Emma did something unexpected. She moved to his desk and began straightening. Papers were sorted into neat piles. Books were aligned carefully. She worked with quiet efficiency, her movements gentle and precise. This wasn't what Marcus had expected. Where was the theft? The snooping? But Emma wasn't finished. She moved to the bookshelf next, running her fingers along the spines with something that looked almost like reverence. Then she pulled down a volume, one of Marcus's favorites, a collection of poetry by Pablo Neruda. She carried it to his reading chair and sat down, curling her legs beneath her. And then she began to read. Not to herself, Marcus realized with shock. To him, Emma's voice, usually so timid and small, transformed as she read. It was soft still, but clear and warm, each word carefully shaped. She read in Spanish first, her accent beautiful and fluid, then translated to English, her voice carrying the weight of each poem's meaning. I love you without knowing how, or when, or from where, she read quietly. I love you simply, without problems or pride. Marcus lay frozen, hardly daring to breathe. This went on for 20 minutes. Emma read poem after poem, her voice filling the study with something Marcus couldn't quite name. Peace, maybe, or comfort. Between poems, she would glance over at him, and Marcus could see her face now, really see it for the first time. There was no fear there. Instead, she looked tender, concerned. You work too hard, Mr. Whitmore, she whispered, though she clearly believed he couldn't hear her. Every day, so many hours. When do you rest? When do you just be? She closed the book gently and returned it to its exact spot on the shelf. Then she did something that made Marcus's chest tighten. Emma walked to a drawer in his desk, one he'd assumed was locked, and pulled out a worn notebook. His notebook. The one where he sometimes wrote late at night when the pressure of running his company became too much. Private thoughts, doubts, dreams he'd never shared with anyone. Marcus's muscles tensed, ready to sit up and confront her. She'd gone too far, but Emma didn't open the notebook. Instead, she held it carefully in both hands and returned it to the drawer. Before closing it, she placed something inside, something she pulled from her apron pocket. Then she shut the drawer softly and moved toward the door. She paused once more to look at him, and Marcus saw something in her expression that made him forget his anger entirely. It was loneliness recognizing loneliness. Kindness offered to someone who seemed to have forgotten what kindness felt like. "Sweet dreams," Emma whispered, and then she was gone. Marcus waited 5 full minutes before sitting up. His heart was pounding. His carefully planned test had revealed something, but not at all what he'd expected. He went to the desk drawer and pulled it open. Inside, next to his notebook, was a small book. Used, well-loved, its pages soft with repeated reading. The title was in Spanish, 20 Love Poems and a Song of Despair, by Pablo Neruda. The same poet Emma had been reading aloud. Marcus opened the cover carefully. On the first page, in careful handwriting, was an inscription. Para mi Emma, con todo mi amor. Abuela, for my Emma, with all my love. Grandmother. Below that, in what Marcus recognized as Emma's handwriting, was a note on a slip of paper. Mr. Whitmore, I've seen you reading this poet. I thought you might like to have this copy. My grandmother gave it to me before she passed, and it brought me comfort during hard times. You seem like you could use some comfort, too. I'm sorry if this is too forward. I'll understand if you'd rather I left it alone. Emma. Marcus sank into his desk chair, the book still in his hands. He thought about all his suspicions, his elaborate test, his certainty that Emma had been stealing from him, the missing fountain pen. He remembered now, it had run out of ink. Emma had probably taken it to refill it. The bookmark? She'd likely moved it when she was dusting, trying to care for his things. The rearranged papers? She was organizing, helping, trying to make his chaotic work life a little more manageable. And all this time, while he'd been suspicious, Emma had been showing him a kindness he hadn't even recognized. She'd been reading to him because she thought he needed rest. She'd been taking care of his space because she could see how overwhelmed he was. And now she was offering him her most precious possession, a connection to her grandmother, because she recognized his loneliness. When had someone last shown him such thoughtfulness? When had anyone looked past the CEO, the demanding boss, the man with more money than sense, and seen just him? Marcus sat in his study for a long time, holding Emma's grandmother's book, thinking about a shy young woman who spoke in whispers but whose heart was braver than she knew. The next morning, Marcus was sitting at the kitchen table when Emma arrived for work. She froze when she saw him, her eyes going wide. "Mr. Whitmore, I can come back. Emma, please sit down." His voice was gentle. She sat, perched on the edge of the chair like a bird ready to take flight. Marcus slid her grandmother's book across the table. "Thank you for this. And for the reading yesterday." Emma's face went pale, then red. "You were awake?" "I was testing you," Marcus admitted and watched her face fall. "I'm sorry. I thought you were. It doesn't matter what I thought. I was wrong." Emma's hands twisted in her lap. "I shouldn't have touched your things. I overstepped. I'll pack my things." "No." Marcus reached across the table, stopping short of touching her hand. "Emma, you've been the kindest person in my life in longer than I can remember. You saw someone struggling and you tried to help in the gentlest way possible. I'm the one who should apologize." Emma's dark eyes finally met his, uncertain. "I can't accept your grandmother's book," Marcus continued. "It's too precious. But I was hoping, maybe you'd read to me sometimes. When you have time, I'd like to hear more of those poems in your voice." A small smile touched Emma's lips, the first real smile he'd ever seen from her. "I'd like that, Mr. Whitmore." "Marcus," he said. "Please, call me Marcus." The morning sun continued to pour through the windows, but now it felt different somehow. Warmer, like the beginning of something neither of them had been looking for, but both of them needed. Sometimes, Marcus would later reflect, the best discoveries come not from our cleverest plans, but from the moments when those plans fall apart entirely, leaving us open to truths we never expected to find. And sometimes, the bravest people are the quiet ones, the ones who show kindness even when they're afraid, who give even when they have little, who see the person behind the title and reach out anyway. Emma had taught him that, and Marcus would be forever grateful she had.